Jensen came out and said that, look, we believe that having another competitor like that with an open source product actually is good for AI. And he said that it's going to increase the usage of our chips. And so we shouldn't be worried about this. We shouldn't be trying to block them in the US. We should welcome them to further heat up the industry. And that's an interesting point of view. You don't know if he's whistling through the graveyard or he actually believes that. And I think he actually believes that. I think he's going to enhance the industry.
I agree. I think he believes it, and I think he's right. NVIDIA doesn't live or die by the DeepSeeks or the OpenAIs winning. NVIDIA lives or dies by AI competitors competing with each other. And that usually means spending more money to get better than the next person. And that is maybe not the DeepSeek way. It maybe came up with an algorithm. However, maybe it's lying to us about doing it more cheaply. Yeah. But even if it does, what is the American response? It has been to spend more money.
Hi, and welcome to the Silicon Insider podcast. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Mike. I'm good.
We're going to make this quick because I think you're going on set pretty quickly. So let's rock it through this. Okay, I think the big news of the week was that Tim Cook goes and meets with President Trump, and the next day announces that Apple's going to spend more than $500 billion in the U.S. over the next 4 years. Now, that's the biggest spend Apple's ever done in terms of capital investment, but it's one of the biggest investments in modern American history. And it's going to happen in the next 4 years. It's going to be in Michigan, Texas, California, Arizona, Nevada, Iowa, Oregon, North Carolina, and Washington. So Apple, from the garage in Los Altos to Bub Road in Cupertino, now is literally going to every corner of the country. They're becoming incredibly geographically diverse. And that says something in part. And then the fact that they're gonna hire estimated 20,000 people is also quite stunning. I mean, what do you think it means? I mean, I think one thing it means is Apple's trying to get out of China. And they had two choices, either go to Southeast Asia or go back to the US.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's wanting to get out of somewhere and wanting to show whether the leadership or its stakeholders or whatever, that it wants to get back in and closer to America, which is good too. It obviously shows that Tim Cook is very bullish on the future. Who knows where any company, not to mention the most valuable company in the world, is going to be in 4 years, and whether they'll be able to add 20,000 people and build and invest all this money. I mean, $500 billion is a huge amount of money, even for Apple. But it's such a bullish on America kind of statement. You know, you love to see it. It shows long-term, probably, like you say, long-term wanting to move away from China, long-term probably trying to avoid some retaliatory tariffs that are flying around. And again, whether it's a nod to the new president or whatever, to say we're going to build a lot in America. I mean, imagine, as you know, back in the day when the biggest companies manufactured in America and hired in America, a company of Apple's size and stature would have dominated America. Yeah. And, I think they want to put a little more of a footprint down here.
Well, and I also think there's other factors as well. It's interesting. I always get a kick out of the PR department writing the speeches, because the last 5 videos of Tim Cook I've seen, they were all touring the Apple facilities in China. And now all of a sudden, we are bullish on the future of American innovation, and we're proud to build on our longstanding U.S. investments with this $500 billion commitment to our country's future. You could literally hear "God Bless America" playing in the background. But I think in a large part he believes it. He believes it for a lot of reasons. I don't think he wants to keep getting labeled as building computers with slave labor in China. I think in China, he's getting a lot of backlash from local manufacturing, competitors, people actually sabotaging U.S. parts and U.S. products. And China's in trouble. And I think also it could be another factor that just came to me, which is if Apple keeps going upscale, if it starts doing, if it goes back to driverless cars, if it goes to more and more AI, will it be able to actually ship the NVIDIA chips or their own chips into China for these new high-end super smart products?
It's a legitimate question. And I think that even with $500 billion over 4 years, and I don't know what Apple's CapEx budget is, but this doesn't necessarily, remember, this doesn't necessarily mean they're only going to build here. They can still build in India. They can build in Malaysia. They can still build in China.
Well, we know they're going to build in India because they just
Right.
made that commitment. Yeah.
Right. And so we'll see that it allows for less of the sort of Cold War that we have going with China when it comes to business and computer chips. And it allows for more flexibility of what you just said and shipping things back and forth. So Apple is obviously playing a long game here, but I think they want to play a flexible game here as well.
Yeah, and I'm intrigued by this geographic diversity. This is the first time we've seen a big high-tech company go, "Oh, let's put one in Iowa. Let's put one in Michigan." I mean, it's going to be have an interesting impact on those communities.
Why not?
The steel industry left 100 years ago, and now the computer industry's finally arrived and hiring everybody.
Right. These are manufacturing areas. They have been manufacturing areas. And, auto companies, both foreign and domestic, have built plants in those areas. Why not computers?
Why not? The modern automobile is basically a computer with four wheels and a steering wheel.
That's true.
So do you see other companies doing the same thing? I know this huge semiconductor consortium is looking at Nevada and Idaho and places like that. Is this the future? I mean, you can't stay in a geographically small area like Silicon Valley, and you can't just go down they've used up Arizona. I mean, Arizona used to be the great opportunity to build fabs because there was nothing there. The employment was available. But I think some of those places, those secondary areas of technology manufacturing, are used up.
Right. Apple, even this week, Apple is not the only big company to say it's going to invest more of its infrastructure and CapEx in America. I think we're going to see companies say that because of the whole America First feeling. Also, and you touched on China, I would add Canada and Mexico, huge trading partners. We do a lot of business and building in both, but now President Trump is slapping 25% tariffs on them, and that may chill things even with our super close neighbors that we do a whole lot of business with. So these companies, in even playing the sort of long game, might be thinking we want open arms to greet us, and there might be fewer countries that greet us with open arms if the administration keeps slapping these tariffs on traditional business partners.
And Trump is going to he's going to load the tariffs on these countries March 4th.
Right.
3 days from now.
Yeah, depending on when you're listening to this, any day now, if it hasn't just happened, not only 25% on Canada and Mexico, but he's upping the tariffs on China from 10 to 20%.
Yeah, 20%. But, we're starting to learn his negotiating practice. And if he starts getting any kind of positive, word from any of these countries, he's going to say, well, it's kind of like TikTok. Well, I'm not going to do it tomorrow, like I said, because we are in negotiations now. It's probably going to happen, so I'm going to put it out an extra 90 days.
Right. I mean, we should say, depending on when you're listening to this, the tariffs may have kicked in, or maybe they've been delayed again. Who knows?
Or maybe not.
Right.
Okay. The next thing is, so March. Oh, I should mention, Apple also doubled the $10 billion it had in that uh, program to add to U.S. manufacturing. It's doubled its fund dedicated to U.S. manufacturing. Uh, Created in Trump's first term. It's now from 5 billion to 10 billion. So that's going to help other companies bring home their manufacturing too, in theory. So it's kind of good news for the U.S. As long as they can find the right people and train them to work in those, because semiconductor and electronics manufacturing is not a low skill. Not just you have to not only have great manual skill, which most of these people do, like Michigan, but you got to have technological skill, and that's going to take some training. And we'll see how these companies deal with that. Okay, um, NVIDIA. Let's talk about NVIDIA. Uh, Apparently, Jensen said the 8 words that everybody's been hoping he was going to say. Just announced it. He said that all the reports about DeepSeek and how it demolished NVIDIA stock for a few days, and et cetera, et cetera. He basically, Jensen came out and said that, look, we believe that having another competitor like that with an open source product actually is good for AI. And he said that it's going to increase the usage of our chips. And so we shouldn't be worried about this. We shouldn't be trying to block them in the US. We should welcome them to further heat up the industry. And that's an interesting point of view. You don't know if he's whistling through the graveyard or he actually believes that. And I think he actually believes that. I
I
think he's
agree.
going to enhance the industry.
I agree. I think he believes it, and I think he's right. NVIDIA doesn't live or die by the DeepSeeks or the OpenAIs winning. NVIDIA lives or dies by AI competitors competing with each other. And
Right.
that usually means spending more money to get better than the next person. And that is maybe not the DeepSeek way. It maybe came up with an algorithm. However, maybe it's lying to us about doing it more cheaply.
Yeah.
But even if it does, what is the American response? It has been to spend more money. And that benefits NVIDIA. So, he was right. The earnings came out obviously very strong. Even the forecast is strong. He says we can't make these Blackwell chips fast enough. And, in the long term, there will be bumps. We saw one Thursday after earnings, but the long term is just, even while we're waiting for AI to become a profit generating thing, these startups and even big companies are spending like drunken sailors to
Yeah.
buy the high speed chips. And that benefits NVIDIA 100%.
Well, your theory that you have to be perfect. I was struck that NVIDIA, their revenues for the quarter were up 78% year over year, and their earnings per share were up 71%. Just about any other company in the world would be popping the champagne with those kinds of numbers. But the world expected more from NVIDIA. It's
I don't know. I think the world is getting what it expects from NVIDIA. Um, there was a sell off to an extent on Thursday, but those were positive numbers that turned negative. I mean, the Dow itself was up 400 points before Trump made yet another tariff announcement. And the
yeah,
stocks fell in the Dow 600 points to lose 200. So a 600-point fall after talking about tariffs, because tariffs are inflationary. I know the president says they aren't. Wall Street knows better, and they sold off by 600 points. Nvidia was up a couple, down a couple, trading
yeah.
in whatever, and then it ended up down about $10 after that, and it took a lot of chip stocks with them. This is all by now fairly old news. Who knows where these things go day to day? But gosh, Nvidia is doing what every investor wants it to do, which is not only blow out each quarter, but look ahead. Even more importantly, look ahead and say,
Yeah.
we really need to continue to crank these things out because the demand is, at least for the foreseeable future, really, really high.
Yeah, and I should also mention that their cash stockpile is up to 43 billion right now, and their operating cash flow is at 16 billion. So they can pretty much do what they want. If they want to do acquisitions, if they want to get into new markets, like Jensen said at CES about a super laptop computer, desktop computer, they got the bucks to do it. They can go anywhere they want.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay. Now, one of the things I read a few days ago was how Microsoft was turning off some of its leases on AI facilities, data centers, and all that. And I said, "Oh, woo! Is that kind of affected the market too? Like Microsoft is kind of getting out of AI." And then a couple days later, Microsoft announced maybe the announcement of the year. I mean, I don't, you know me, I'm always looking at way up there at the top of the food chain in chips and breakthroughs at the technology level. And Microsoft unveiled its Majorana, that sounds like a Disney exhibit, one quantum chip that it actually, it's basically a quantum chip. We've been talking about quantum computers. When I was 23 years old at Hewlett Packard, the big thing was going to be quantum computing. Well, they seem to have a device that is a quantum computer. And even more remarkably, they have developed, or they have found or created an elusive material called a topological semiconductor. It's not a liquid, it's not a solid, it's not a gas. And I first heard about the idea of this 20 years ago. And it looks like they're actually going to be able to build it. And the notion that, Moore's law is going to slow down, here we are again. And they got a picture of the quantum computer. It looks very different from a normal semiconductor. But if they've really got this and they think they could have a product out by 2030, I think, the first one, that would be utterly revolutionary. What do you think? You buy it? You think Microsoft can pull it off? I mean, the idea of a whole new form of state of matter, that's not little,
No, and the back and forth, even in the last couple of months, because of companies like NVIDIA and Microsoft, as to whether or not quantum computing is here or is on the way, has been enough of a debate where people are paying attention and getting some investment in it, obviously, but nothing's happened yet. And I think part of it may be because, another thing we had been talking about for decades and decades and decades is artificial intelligence. And that seems to have arrived in some form. And so it sort of makes sense that the quantum fans are like, hey, what about us? But it feels early to talk about that in any consumer form.
And sure, and Google's announced that it's got one
right.
quantum chip too, but it's a question of what kind of quantum chip. And one that actually harnesses a new form of matter caught my attention, and, it's very interesting. And the notion, the ability of these things to compute, if they're real, is mind-boggling. It would actually take the NVIDIA chip and pump it up 1,000 times or even 100,000 times. And that chip, the NVIDIA chip, has 3 trillion transistors on it. I mean, this is when they talk about Moore's law going up like this is where it starts going completely vertical.
Right, but these things have existed in niches for a long time. It was years ago. IBM up at its Almaden Research Center, sort of their Skunk Works place, showed me a computer that was a drop of water. And I thought, whoa, that's amazing. And all these years later, the size of my laptop isn't any smaller. I mean, really.
No. But it's a lot smarter.
It's a lot smarter, a lot more powerful.
Your fingers don't get smaller.
Right. And I'm still not answering a drop of water or dictating into a drop of water. So, these things are great. I love to see them, but it's different to see them than to actually use them in the wild. It's just, we're just not there yet.
Well, just for the audience, Microsoft claims that Majorana 1, it currently holds 8 qubits, and that's whatever the number of bits that is, 1 to the 12th, 10 to the 12th. and is designed to house up to 1 million of those qubits. That's basically equivalent, I think, to most of the electrons in the solar system, or some incredible number like that. So, well, they say don't get too excited yet. Basically, they say, while some researchers unaffiliated with Microsoft are optimistic, they warn that it's a bit of Schrodinger's qubit situation. Microsoft paper only presents intermediary results, which the company itself disclaims don't actually prove that the qubit it created can truly run on a topological superconductor. So superconductors, new states of matter, we kind of made it run, but hang tight. But always remember Malone's law, which is every new technological breakthrough takes longer than predicted, but arrives sooner than we're prepared for it. So get ready now, folks. And then finally, Amazon Wednesday unveiled a generative AI-infused Alexa, which will allow the popular voice assistant to have more personality, check a user's tone. So don't get pissed off at Alexa, because it will know, and even plan romantic dates, probably with other Alexas. So,
Yeah, that sounds real privacy oriented. I know families who have their kids, because you can just say, "Hey Alexa, play this song," or "Hey Alexa, do something," and they are worried their kids are going to get, understandably, used to just telling people, "Hey, do this for me." So
right.
they ask their kids to ask Alexa nicely.
Well, now Alexa will say, "Don't take that tone with me, young lady."
Exactly.
Customers will have to pay Amazon a monthly fee of $20 for the revamped voice assistant, which it calls Electra Plus, and it'll be free for Prime members. And I know you're in a hurry, so that's it for now, folks. Get your jacket on and get on stage. You can find us on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. You can see Scott on Facebook and X, and of course, almost every weeknight on NBC Bay Area. And hear me regularly on the BBC radio show Business Matters. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.